Hi, this is Mark from Altcoin Buzz, and we're going to take a look at Bitcoin today. As we get started on the new week, what are we going to be getting into? Mondays over the recent times have defined where Bitcoin's going to go for the rest of the week as far as price action goes. And we are at a very critical point right now. Are we going to break down from here and this parabolic rise is over? Or are we going to continue on and hit that looming $15,000 target that seems to be out there? Let's take a look at the charts together. Okay, so like I said, a lot going on here on the Bitcoin chart, and let me just go through it with you. I'll try and clean this up a little bit, explain things out for you, and see if I can't make some sense of this. We've got a 4-hour chart on the Bitstamp chart, 4-hour USD chart, okay, on Bitcoin. And what we're looking at here is what seems to be a smaller descending triangle forming. We've got lower highs. We've tested this upper resistance area a few times. We've tested the bottom support area a couple times. And for this to maintain itself, we'd have to come back and test this bottom area of support once again. Otherwise, if we go this way, we basically have a regular triangle, a symmetrical triangle. And that symmetrical triangle means that we don't have really any indication of which way the price is going to end up going, because we've got equal lower highs being made and equal higher lows being made. And so the breakout point to the up or the downside is undetermined. And that really looks like where we're at right now. However, if we go again, if we test down at this bottom level one more time, that's going to start defending this descending triangle pattern versus just a symmetrical triangle. On the macro level, we have what looks to be a descending triangle as well. So we'll take a look at that. We're excluding this out of here, and I'll show you why in just a minute, because there's a couple other things that we're going to have to look at from a regression trend standpoint. Let's just take a look at what would happen if this plays out to be a descending triangle. Then we start looking at this macro level triangle, and the chances of that playing out, if the micro level plays out, the chances of the macro level are greater to play out as well. So what you have here is, if this macro level triangle plays out and we take the widest part of the base, so I'm taking this out of here right now, and again we'll take a look at that in just a minute, but that's about 15% right in there. A break out of this triangle, let's just say it comes in here somewhere, out of this triangle at 15% is going to take us up somewhere around $13,000 again. A break down from this triangle, if we break out of the bottom of this triangle, and again I'm going to use the macro level triangle, if we break out of this macro triangle down to the bottom at 15%, then we're roughly in this area that we had resistance back in June, which is about $9,300. Okay, so those are the kind of two targets from the upside or the downside based upon descending triangles, which have not been confirmed yet. Again, a confirmation of this micro triangle would be another test down in this area, somewhere between $11,200 and $11,000. Those numbers also line up with some Fibonacci trend lines, but the other thing we want to take a look at is that we've got some momentum that's still continuing on the 4-hour, right? We're still continuing a small momentum up, but we've got declining volume over the last 4 hours. So the difference between the momentum and the volume is telling us how much conviction, how much force is behind that momentum, right? So while we've got increasing momentum still on the 4-hour, we've got this declining volume, which means that those moves up are not very strong, right? There's not a lot of conviction against those moves up. So the momentum is there, but without a lot of conviction. So let's just go up to the 1-day chart. If we look at the 1-day chart, you can start seeing where that other larger macro descending triangle would be. Now, I've taken the wicks out of this move. And there's a reason for that, because those wicks were those candles that we saw on the 4-hour chart. Those two big candles that basically cancel each other out. So that's why I'm pulling that wick out of there on this descending triangle. So if I take this area back here, where we really started the uptrend back in February, and I bring it over to where we're at today, and where we came out of it was when we peaked out at that $13,000, right? That's when we came out of it. Now we're back into that regression trend line again, hitting the top of it, coming back down and trying to find support against that median. And we're sitting right in the middle of it at this point in time. Okay, so that's why I think this is critical to us, because we're trying to find support on the Ichimoku cloud. That's where our support should be, right where we're at right now. If we break out of this descending triangle to the downside, that also happens to be right now where our medium regression trend line lies. You can see our momentum on the MACD. We had a crossover back in here, back in the beginning of the month, and we're trying to level out right now, but we're still on the decline after that crossover. And it looks like we're starting to find this kind of range on the RSI, which isn't going to give us a lot of movement on these swings. One other thing I want to take a look at with you is some folks have asked about the futures and the gaps that have played out, because as we look at futures, the gaps tend to want to be filled. You can see back here we had this huge gap up, right? And it was filled with this wick down. That wick also touched the 21 period moving average, and we've been playing with that moving average for quite a while here on this run up. We moved far away from it on this move to $13,000, came back down and filled this gap that was here previously, but we have not filled the gap in the $8,000 or $9,000 range. And if you look at where that measured move plays out on the descending triangle, if that happens, it would be right in that area. So theoretically, a breakdown from that triangle taking us down into this gap, if it wants to be filled, and it typically does get filled. And so you got filled back in here on this gap, it got filled back in here with that wick on this gap, and got filled back here on this gap already as well. So that's another indication that there's a void that wants to be filled, because nature abhors a void, right? So is this tether pump over now? And why is this whole tether thing important? Well, because this whole rise up, and you can go back a couple months ago, I did a video on this whole rise up being built on a house of cards. It's not new money coming into the market that's fueling this as much as it is Tether printing money and dumping it into the market, into Bitcoin, to raise the price up. If you're new to this space, you may not know that the same CEO of Tether is the same CEO of Bitfinex, one of the largest crypto exchanges out there and the largest market cap as far as a stablecoin goes. So now you've got those two big entities with the same CEO. Logically, you can come to a lot of conclusions on collusion between the two, right? We've been talking about how much money Tether has been printing, watching those whale alerts on Twitter. If you're not watching them, it's been about 7, 8, probably almost $1 billion by now over the last couple months. Coincidentally, Bitfinex owes Tether around $700 million, and they just paid back about $100 million of that. Compound that with the fact that Tether is motivated to wash as much money or gain as much money on Tether, whatever you want to call it. Tether is motivated to get the market price of Bitcoin up, and they were motivated to do it very quickly, as they've been in court with Bitfinex in the New York State courts. Now they've got a stay of execution here a little bit, because there has to be a decision made around the 29th of this month. Tether and Bitfinex are basically claiming that New York has no jurisdiction over them because they haven't had any customers in New York, and so therefore nobody's been affected. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. But obviously, knowing that this was coming, coincidentally, price of Bitcoin up is when Bitcoin's price started to move up dramatically on this parabolic run. And this sounds like black helicopter stuff, but you should understand the dynamics behind the scenes, some of the fundamentals that are going on, because what you may be looking at if you're just coming into the market is this parabolic rise up, not understanding that there are other forces at work here. And at any point in time, the rug could be pulled out from underneath us. And I don't believe that there's enough new retail investors out there, especially investors, not traders, to hold this market back up if there was an exodus of Tether going on. So that's why it's important to keep an eye on the Tether ball. Am I crying manipulation? Well, yes. I mean, I'm not crying about it. It is part of the market. It's part of all markets to some extent, including the traditional markets. What I'm trying to illustrate is that we need to be aware of that going on in the background, because that clears up a lot of things in the charts as we look at them. Okay, so while short term, we've got what appears could be a little bit of a reversal pattern starting to form on Bitcoin here. But we could also find ourselves in a consolidation trading range coming up here now in this green box between the 12, call it 12.5 down to $11,000, and trade in that range for a while, just like we did back in this area between April and May, and again in this area between mid-May and mid-June, and then we take our next leg up. So that's why this support area that we're sitting in right now, 10.5, if we break below that, that's so important to breaking this market structure that we've seen on this run up here. If that 10.5 is broken, in my opinion, we go back down to the prior swing lows at that 8,700. We fill that gap that we have on the futures chart, so that gets fulfilled. We find support at the top of the Ichimoku cloud here, and then we come back up for another test of this as resistance to potentially break through and take our next leg up. Now on the bullish side, we stay in this trading range like we did back here, reset ourselves up for the next run up. We could break out of this descending triangle, make the measured move up, and continue with this parabolic rise. And you also have the fact that Bitcoin has outsurpassed the Kardashians in Google search. So you've got that going for you. Now, a final note here on the bullish side. If we do get a breakout from this descending triangle right here on low volume, because again, our volume is declining, be careful of kind of a fake breakout. Because really what we want to see is a breakout of this triangle with volume that's either above average or at least at average. Okay, so tomorrow's a very defining day because the markets open up fully, and I'm not counting the last 4 days of activity really, at least from a USA standpoint. I'm sorry, but not that we control the market, but we did have a long holiday weekend. So our volume was largely pulled out of the charts this weekend over the last 4 days. And Mondays have indicated where the direction of Bitcoin is going to go. So I'm looking at the opening for tomorrow to see what happens. Hey, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. Also follow me on Twitter at crypto_old. I do TA throughout the week when I'm not able to make videos. And so you might have seen some of this already pop up if you've been following me there. Also visit us on altcoinbuzz.io and all the other social media sites. But altcoinbuzz.io is a great place to start because you'll find all kinds of articles from our great writers throughout the week. And Maddie will cover those articles daily here on YouTube. So make sure you are subscribed and are liking Altcoin Buzz right now so that you get those updates as they come out, when they come out, and you're in the know. Until next time, may all your trades be good ones.